Hey buddy, you've heard of the Booga sphere, right? The tiny UFO ball that they collected in Booga, Colombia? Earlier this year, back in March, a group of people in Booga, Colombia claimed that they found alien technology flying above their heads. A silver ball that supposedly was seen floating in the air. They released a video of this silver sphere floating around in the air for several minutes until it eventually lands on the ground, and one of the people filming walked into the trees and collected the sphere. Since then, this thing has been passed around to a bunch of different researchers, and a ton of different tests have been done on the Booga sphere. X-rays, carbon dating analysis, all sorts of things. And there are people that are basically claiming that they've proven that this is alien technology. There are some cool facts about the Booga sphere that make it sound pretty interesting on the face of it. Supposedly, it only weighed about 2 or 3 kilograms when it was originally collected from the ground by the people who were filming it, and now it somehow weighs over 10 kilograms. And also, it's made out of a material that's much harder and stronger than NASA's space-grade aluminum. And it's also perfectly smooth and seamless. Besides the designs on the top of the sphere, obviously, the exterior of the device appears to be made out of a single smooth piece of metal. But I feel like the entire internet was going crazy over the Booga sphere for a few months there. I was seeing content about the Booga sphere popping up on my feed several times a day at one point. In my mind, it's pretty obvious that this thing is fake. I mean, the Booga sphere has to be a hoax, right? But somehow the Booga sphere has maintained a pretty large following. Apparently, there are thousands of people who believe that the Booga sphere is a real piece of alien technology that was genuinely filmed flying in the air above Booga, Colombia. Avid UFO enthusiast Hayam Musan is convinced that this is real and that they've found an alien craft. So could the Booga sphere actually be alien technology, or is this all just an elaborate hoax? Is the Booga sphere actually from outer space? Lots of ufologists have come out and said that the Booga sphere is real. Even Dr. Stephen Greer, one of the most famous and well-respected ufologists on Earth, seems pretty convinced that the Booga sphere is real.
My assessment of this is pending, but it's certainly real.
The researchers claim that the Booga sphere uses electromagnetism to create anti-gravity propulsion.
It's using an energy field and what we probably would say is electrogravitic, which means a type of anti-gravity effect from the electromagnetic forces.
I don't know exactly how they've come to this conclusion. The Booga sphere has been x-rayed and studied and stuff, but nobody has actually gotten this thing to work since it was originally collected on the ground in Booga, Colombia. I mean, I'm no expert, but I don't think that the x-rays have really revealed enough about the internal workings of the Booga sphere to explain how it might operate. There isn't enough detail in those images that show how it works. For the most part, this thing seems mostly inert. The most amazing thing that they could supposedly get it to do was to react to certain sounds and songs. At one point, they decided to have a woman sing an ancient Sanskrit song next to the Booga sphere, and the scientists, in their fancy white lab coats, recorded the sphere reacting to the song with electromagnetism or something.
Oh,
look at the way that the scientists are nodding at each other while reading their results. Seems legit. Dr. Stephen Greer also claims that they managed to carbon date some of the material that they found around the middle of the sphere inside of those holes, and they've determined that the Booga sphere could be upwards of 12,500 years old. That's a wild claim. I mean, I think that I'd like to believe a claim like that, but the problem is that we're left to trust that these scientists that currently have possession of the Booga sphere are being honest about where they're sourcing this carbon from and the test results that they got back. They apparently found this carbon or resin in the holes that are around the middle of this thing. There are some major issues with this paper though. It's riddled with spelling mistakes and typos. For example, the company that tested it is called Sirius Technology, but they spelled it Technology. That's kind of sketchy. Also, the paper refers to the material that they tested in several different ways, at one point calling it a resin, but at the beginning of the paper they call it a foraminifer, which essentially means seashell. So if this paper is being honest and they tested seashell residue, it's not actually that impressive that it's 12,500 years old, because you can find seashells that are that old. And you also have to remember that this was a resin that was found on the outside of the sphere. This is not the sphere itself that was tested at 12,500 years old, meaning that that resin could have been added to the outside of the sphere at any time. It doesn't mean that the sphere itself or anything inside of the sphere is 12,500 years old. The point is that the material that they found inside of these holes around the middle of this sphere date back to the time of the last ice age. I don't know, man. And the researchers also claim that they've managed to find a sophisticated fiber optic system inside of the sphere that's completely absent from wiring. They say that it's state-of-the-art technology that allows the Booga sphere to communicate with its internal workings efficiently and achieve anti-gravity. But I don't know how they're coming to this determination. My question is, how can you be so sure that you found a sophisticated fiber optic system inside of this thing when it doesn't have any wiring? It kind of just sounds like they came up with a fantastical answer for why you can see a fibrous design on the inside of the Booga sphere. And I don't really like that they've come to conclusions like this after only a few months of studying this thing, and they haven't even opened it up yet to actually see what's inside. And how can you be so sure that that's what those internal workings do when nobody has actually gotten it to operate yet? And like I said, nobody's gotten this thing to work. Just cut the thing open and let us see what's inside already. Come on, just let us see what it is. But other than that, nothing that they've really revealed to the public about the Booga sphere so far is very meaningful. I just think that this thing is fake, and it's going to be pretty hard to convince me otherwise. So let's just go over some of my arguments as to why I think this thing is fake, and if you disagree with me, just let me know your thoughts in the comments. First of all, the Booga sphere is made up mostly of aluminum. They've done a metallurgic analysis of the shell, and they've determined that it's made up of 72% aluminum and 22% silicon, apparently. And like I said, they claim that this thing is stronger than NASA's space-grade aluminum, which is pretty impressive if that's true. But I think that I might know why this would be stronger than NASA's aluminum, and I'm gonna get to that later. Now, if you wanted to be able to determine beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Booga sphere was not actually built here on Earth and that it's from outer space or from a different solar system, then all you would have to do is test the materials and count the isotope numbers of all of the elements that make up the Booga sphere. If it's from here on Earth, then we should recognize the isotope numbers of all of the elements. We would know immediately that the Booga sphere was made on Earth. But if it's from somewhere out in space, or even better, a different solar system, then the silicon and the aluminum and all of the other materials that make it up should have a totally alien isotope number. We should not recognize the isotope number, and it would be a dead giveaway that it did not come from Earth. This is often how we're able to determine that rocks that we find on the ground are meteorites that landed on Earth and are not stone that were produced on the Earth. Because the materials that make up a meteorite have totally alien isotope numbers. Simple. So why haven't they done this test yet? This should have been the first thing that they tested. If you want to prove that this thing is alien, just show us the isotope numbers. Right? To me, it doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't do this test. Unless they already know that the Booga sphere is fake and they're intentionally avoiding doing the material test because they don't want to give it away. I feel like this is just really good evidence that this thing has to be a hoax. And secondly, outside of the overall structure of the Booga sphere itself, the craftsmanship of the art on top of the Booga sphere is just terrible. This thing looks awful. The etching of the designs are not symmetrical. They're sloppy with haphazard markings. Hayam Masson claimed that they acknowledged that the Booga sphere was created using manual craftsmanship. I mean, obviously it was manual craftsmanship, you can't escape that fact. But come on, man, if this thing was designed by an advanced civilization that can create anti-gravity propulsion, then their craftsmanship should be a lot better than this. It just looks like someone got a hold of one of those home engraving kits and just went to town on this thing like a kid carving their first jack-o'-lantern. The holes or the dots on the side of the sphere are even worse. When I first saw them, I thought that they were actual holes. I've heard them referred to as holes, but when you look at them up close, really they look more like they're painted on. I can't even really tell you for sure if they're actually carved into the sphere, or if I'm just looking at paint on the exterior. Either way, these things look like garbage. These dots are not evenly spaced, they don't match each other, they're not even close to being lined up perfectly, and they're not symmetrical. Again, they kind of just look like they're each a random shape. I don't know, I don't trust this. And then there's the dots and the lines on the top of the sphere as well. I think that this is supposed to look like some sort of an electronic design, but according to the scans, it's not even actually attached to any kind of real circuitry. I think the artist who made this wanted to create the appearance of sophistication and complexity to the design of the sphere, but they could only really carve a design that sort of looks intricate. This doesn't seem to do anything. Nobody has described any kind of functionality for this circuitry. And with those copper looking dots, again, it sort of just looks like somebody took a soldering kit and dropped some copper into some holes that they drilled into the top. Then there's the video of the sphere flying. Nobody's buying this, right? I know that this might appear convincing to people on their first viewing, but if you spend just a little bit of time thinking about this, they probably just hung this thing from a drone using a fishing line and then filmed it from far enough away that the fishing line would not show up on the camera. We also can't know for sure that the sphere that we're seeing in the video is the exact same sphere that the researchers now have possession of. In fact, we can't even be sure that the sphere that we see at the beginning of the video flying around is the same sphere that we see those camera people picking up from the woods at the end of the video. There's a cut halfway through the video, so they could have just switched it out at any point. That might also explain why it weighs differently now than it did when it was first collected. Maybe it's not the same sphere anymore. The point is that the sphere that we're seeing them pick up at the end of the video could be a completely different sphere than the one that we're seeing flying around. So it might have a completely different mechanism on it. The sphere that we're seeing the researchers studying could be the hero prop, and the sphere that we saw flying around the air might be the practical prop. Who knows? In the video though, the Booga sphere kind of just looks like it's hanging off of something else. It kind of just looks like it's dangling. It never really makes any intentional forward movements. It more kind of just meanders around in circles, lifting up and down. Up and down are pretty much the primary movements that the Booga sphere makes in the video. I want to see this thing stop dead in the air and then make a very intentional, deliberate movement forward. But we never see it do that. This isn't really that much more impressive than those old black and white photos of UFOs that people used to make in the 60s. A couple of guys mocked up their very own flying sphere video using a ball hanging from a drone. They didn't put any effort into hiding the string, they kind of just put a sphere in a net and then attached it to a rope. But this is a really good proof of concept. Their fake sphere is essentially moving around in an identical way to the Booga sphere in the original video. And at certain points, you can't even see the net and the rope at all, proving that it would have been really easy for hoaxers to hide a string in the Booga video. Also, about 12 years ago, a student in Singapore uploaded a video of a prototype of a spherical drone that he was building for a project. Again, this is proof of concept that you can create a spherical drone. The Booga sphere in the video could have been built in a very similar way, and again, they could have just swapped out this flying model for the artistic model that they gave to the researchers. The point that I'm making is that a video of a flying ball ball is not really that impressive on its own. Hoaxers have been able to fake things like this for decades now. We can do this on Earth. Humans can create flying balls just like this. Then there's the X-rays. There's basically nothing to see here. It's not necessarily empty or anything, but there isn't any kind of machinery or any kind of recognizable mechanisms or chambers in this thing. There appears to be a thick outer shell with maybe a secondary chamber or structure that's just slightly smaller than the main sphere, or this could just be a really thick shell with an empty chamber inside. I'm confused by this. I guess that this doesn't necessarily prove that the Booga sphere is fake, but it sure as hell doesn't prove that the Booga sphere is alien technology. Some of the scans make it look like it might even be a bowling ball with an aluminum shell. These scans look similar to the internal structures of a bowling ball. So remember that I said I was going to talk about the strength of the material, the strength of the Booga sphere structure? Well, there's a reason why the aluminum of the Booga sphere could be stronger than NASA's space-grade aluminum, or at least why it would be stronger than a space capsule. A space capsule has to hold in breathable atmosphere for astronauts. It has to maintain enough pressure for that atmosphere inside of the capsule while the capsule is out in the vacuum of space. So a capsule has to hold in 1 unit of atmosphere while it's in -1 unit of atmosphere, a difference of 2 atmospheres. But we use a ton of different metallic objects that are expected to hold a lot more pressure than that. For example, an air compressor might be able to hold upwards of 200 pounds per square inch of pressure. Even an air compressor that's pressurized up to 150 psi is holding 10 atmospheres of air. That's a lot more intense than a space capsule that has to hold in 1 unit of atmosphere inside of an environment that's -1 unit of atmosphere. I think you know where I'm going with this. This is a hydrazine tank that's used in satellites and spacecraft. Hydrazine is a propellant that's used to move vehicles and satellites in space. It looks an awful lot like the Booga sphere, eh? There are actually a wide variety of different tanks made out of aluminum and titanium that are used to hold a wide assortment of different pressurized gases. And these tanks come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. The people that are trying to convince you that the Booga sphere looks like nothing that we have here on Earth are lying to you. Or they've just never seen a cylindrical pressure tank before. We see lots of things like this in industrial use and in our own space technology. So I guess technically the Booga sphere might have come from space, but it was originally built here on Earth before it was sent up there. If you ask me, it looks as if the artist who made the Booga sphere just got their hands on a cylindrical pressure tank. They cut the valve stem off of the top to make it perfectly round, and then added those designs on the top to both hide the hole from the valve stem and also make it look like it was designed in outer space. In fact, I actually think that that seam around the middle of the sphere is an indication of how the sphere was originally made in the factory. It was likely 2 separate half spheres that were just welded together using a manufacturing robot, and the artist added those holes around the seams to make it look like it was a more functional, purposeful design, I guess. But honestly, in my opinion, the worst part of it is that microchip looking thing in the center and all of the fake circuitry coming off of it. Why would you do that if you had no intention of actually making that part functional? That just gives it away that this is a hoax. But tell me what you think. Is there a reason to believe that the Booga sphere is a real alien device? Or maybe it's ancient human technology that's been floating around in the air for 12,000 years? Or do you think that this is just a giant hoax that should not be getting this much attention? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much to my patrons and my channel members for supporting my videos. I could not do this without you. Anybody who supports my channel gets to watch my videos in advance, and you also get access to exclusive content. Patrons and Ko-fi members also get access to the Armoured Skeptic Discord server. The links are in the description. Again, thank you so much. I love you guys.